That should be on the way. Hello, Mr. Robeson.
Hey, how are you?
Good, very good.
How are things?
Good. We're on now.
Okay, good,
Yep.
very good.
Man,
I saw Mike, he's coming up. I saw him in the parking lot.
Who's that?
Mike.
Oh, yeah. First. First.
Is anybody online? Like any member? Or is it?
We have to call. Hi, Mike.
Hey,
We have to call. We have to call Michelle.
Oh. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
No, okay. So we have to. Look at- How are you? Good. Yeah, good.
And I said,
Hey, Michelle, how are you? All right, putting you on speaker.
thank you.
And I'm gonna move this down.
Once I know that, I'll put myself on there.
Yep, so we're good. We're good right now.
Okay, thank you.
Archon. That's the open one?
That's the one I wrote.
Okay.
How are you? Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. We should be able to do the speaker phone.
Yes. No, I think we're good. I actually think we're good. Let me just try to get the password for an action. I guess we should- Oh, no, thank you so much. We're set.
Heard from anybody else who might have it coming?
I have Michelle, who's on the line here.
Right.
And Dr.
Yeah. Is it just Greg is the only one missing?
Oh, you do? Jim, Mr. Acker is on. It's good. Okay. Did we find it? Okay, all right, but we're good. He's got it. Okay, good.
Everybody else, Greg. And Rod. I didn't hear from. I don't know, we're not required to ask, right? She's just. Pardon me? Is requiring it? Really? Okay, so that's what we're all good, right?
Ready to go.
Ready?
Yeah, set.
Good evening, welcome to our August 4th, 2021 work session. Would everyone please rise to pledge our flag? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jim, are you going to do roll call or would you
I
mind?
will, absolutely. Mr. Acker?
Here.
Mr. Azar? Here. Dr. Cadman?
Here.
Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Mr. Bedensky?
Here.
Mrs. Pusateri?
Here.
Mr. Robeson?
Here.
Mrs. Tierney?
Here.
And Mrs. Brashalski?
Here,
Everyone is here.
okay. Dr. Mann, you ready with the superintendent report?
I am Mr. Prashalski. I just wanted to give a quick update. Since our last meeting, the bulk of our time has been spent discussing COVID and our safety plan, which we have posted online. Since our last meeting, there has been a change in CDC guidance with respect to masking. And I'm not sure if the board had if members had any insights, but I just wanted to throw out a couple thoughts that I'm hearing from across the state. And that is, as far as some options, by and large, school districts in large numbers are mask optional. It's very hard to find districts that have required masks, although there are some now that we're hearing are going to masking required. As far as other options that are being considered, mask optional and convert when transmission rates in community become higher substantial. That's something that people are doing. Masks are required in buildings with large numbers of unvaccinated students in Abington Heights. That would be our elementary and our middle school as an option. And then there's some combination of reaching high or substantial and then having some and others wear masks in the so some combination of the previous two. And then finally, while we haven't seen many outside of maybe large urban districts, there is the idea of just flat out requiring masks in school. I think some Monroe County districts had said, we will do it when we hit substantial, and they have just very recently hit substantial in their local transmission rates. So again, the other point I also want to make is that we're scheduled to start school on September 8th. So we're over a month away. And in COVID terms, a month is almost 100 years as far as developments and changes and alterations are concerned. So while we want to get word out to the community and we have some frequently asked questions, we're going to early next week get out. I just thought I would raise these points in the event that any board member wanted to offer thoughts or suggestions.
What would be the definition of substantial and by which metrics? Where do we get those
Yeah,
statistics from?
it's positivity rate and incident rate are the two metrics that are used. And when they hit, and it's well defined, there's a website and it's very well defined as to when positivity, it might be 9. I couldn't repeat the thing, but it's very well defined. And the definition that had been used was if one of the two metrics exceed, then that is the trigger for all metrics being in that category.
But is it by county, by school district, by like, how do you define the, what
Yeah.
we're measuring?
We would, I think the most valuable measure for us would be by county. There are some unofficial websites that do it by zip code, but probably the best, most valuable tool that we would be able to use would be by county. But you could do it by state or by any other larger metric. But probably the most granular one that has some sense of reliability would be the county level.
A lot of businesses are already going into masking and things like that in a lot of the areas that are higher incident rates, like Northampton County's gone up. So have all the bordering counties along Pennsylvania. So there's something happening here. Lackawanna County, I think 80% of the people are vaccinated, which is fantastic. So their incident rate is very low. So if we just monitor those, we have time to make that decision. So I'm like, I don't want to overreact at the data right now, where I think some companies are, but they're doing it to protect their workforce. So it's like, I think it's a wait and see kind of thing. We have a month before school starts to really maybe change any kind of perspective or our policies, let's put it that way. So I'm going to say just wait. Sorry.
I just have a couple questions. Dr. Mann, can you give us an update on the buildings and the ventilation in preparation for the start of school? Has there been a mass cleaning of all the buildings and rooms?
Oh, sure. Our buildings, as always, are being scrubbed for the summer. Our ventilation, as we have reported through the years, we have good ventilation in our classrooms and in our buildings. So we are not, as some districts are facing crises of aging and unmaintained equipment. That fortunately, through the support of the board and the work of our support staff and maintenance team, is not the case here. And our buildings are starting to look good. Now, we're not ready because have we ever been at this early time, but by the time the schools are ready to open, our buildings will be spotlessly clean.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just offer the fact that Geisinger today issued a mask mandate, whether you're vaccinated, unvaccinated, inside, outside, no matter what. And the causality being, according to those that, communicate the information there, Lackawanna and Luzerne counties are of substantial rate as of August 3rd, according to the Geisinger people. And apparently there's a new variant called Lambda. So not only Delta, but now Lambda. So I know that they spend a lot of time. They're very up on all their information and data, and I do trust their advice. So on a personal level, and that will translate into my decision-making here, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people voicing opinions, but I will, be following and using the Geisinger information in order to make decisions, not only for myself personally, but as a school board member. I know myself, my niece from Germany arrived yesterday. I did hug her didn't really know. So everybody's real life happenings every day are such that, it's impossible to say, who's doing what, who's where, who's been where. So when we get into counties, especially when school starts and these athletes and anybody participating in extracurriculars are crossing county lines, I think it'll be even more important. The biggest thing that I think people need to keep in mind is everybody that's vaccinated stands a chance of getting less ill by contracting any of these variants or COVID itself, but they're highly transmissible. So you can be asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic, but you can, pass a big viral load on to anybody at any time. So that'll be my position moving forward.
Jean, did you just say that Lackawanna County is of substantial now?
According to Geisinger's information that they released this afternoon, they said that Lackawanna and Luzerne County are, as of August 3rd, considered substantial. I'm sure everybody draws data from different, places and ways, but that's according to Geisinger.
That may be just, we only do it on Friday, so ours is less current than that. So that was the last look that we had, but it could have changed easily since then. So beyond that, Mr. Petrowski, I have no formal
okay.
report, but we do have some action items, and I know that we have a need for executive session following the meeting for personnel.
Okay. I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes. Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mrs. Brashalski.
Yes.
9 yes.
Okay, at this time, we would invite members of the public who wish to address the board to just fill out a card or piece of paper with your name and your address. And then please remember that you will have 3 minutes and that the public comment session is reserved for district residents and taxpayers. So our first speaker is Philip Horahan.
Thank you. And interesting discussion there about where we get data. I'd be interested in knowing where the board is getting their data. So is it CDC or is it? I've had a look. Data is available from the Pennsylvania Department of Health, giving vaccination rates in age brackets in our county. That's not from Rachel Maddow and it's not from Tucker Carlson. That's the PA Department of Health. It shows at the moment, looking at today, 63% of the population in Lackawanna County is fully or partially vaccinated. 63, not 80, 63. But it also shows that, of course, that's not even across ages. It's 82% in the over 50s. So they're pulling that average up. It's 72% in the over 20s. So you can look at school age children. You can look at ages 5 to 19. It's 26%. So look at the people in your county. We're pretty well protected. People in your buildings, not so much. They've got a very low vaccination rate. The students, staff, as I understand it from comments you made earlier, are fairly highly vaccinated, which is obviously fantastic. So our school age population doesn't have a great vaccination rate, and many of them cannot because they're too young. CDC guidelines stresses this in the mandate, in the recommends layered prevention strategies in schools K to 6, by which it means bullet number 2 on those layered prevention strategies is masking. Bullet 1 is vaccination, of which many kids simply are not eligible, can't be done. So the PA Department of Health and the PA Department of Education recommend following the CDC guidelines. Our current health plan does not follow these guidelines, and it did not at the time it was approved by the board. 2 weeks ago, because at that time, the guidance from the CDC was for unvaccinated people to be masked indoors. And we have now said that's not necessary. At the moment, what stands at the moment is not necessary. The CHOP Policy Lab document, which was referenced at the last board, as kind of in some way allaying the fears that this might happen of a non-mask policy, does not recommend a non-mask policy. It acknowledges that some boards, some schools will adopt it. It does not recommend it. So the board has stated that it could change based on some data in the community and facts on the ground, which I think is, sensible and appropriate. We'd be horrified to hear otherwise. I think the parents have a right to know what the board considers sufficiently risky that we want to change steps. And I think that should be made public. We should understand that how that choice is going to be made for our kids. At the moment, we have "we'll see" statements, which is not very concrete. And this is not a very abstract thing for me. I have 2 children who are unvaccinated. Every child in their class will be unvaccinated. And a large number of those children will come from households where the adults are unvaccinated and do not follow CDC guidelines to stop contracting and transmitting the disease to their children and to my children and to your children and to the staff. So given that the health and safety plan does not currently follow the CDC guidelines, the PA Department of Health guidelines, or the PA Department of Education guidelines, what is the school's legal liability if a child contracts COVID and contact tracing demonstrates they likely got it at school? I think we should know that as well, because we may be taking on, quite apart from the moral and ethical problems here, an enormous financial risk.
Okay, thank you.
How would I expect to find a response to some of that?
I think maybe we could, I think if there's a lot of similar, I don't know if Dr. May, do you have any comments to?
I did email the board and got 1 response during the last week. 1. Are those emails active? I don't know. Is anybody reading them?
Yes.
I read all of them.
I got no responses. So we made a point at the last meeting that all of these decisions were made in public. It doesn't appear to be the case. That everything was terribly transparent, but we're not hearing anything. So I've asked fairly solid questions. I would like to understand how I will get the answers to those. The minutes are, I think, showing that no one is answering. Is that right?
Wait, you've asked very solid questions, like specifically what are our metrics? I think we were just briefly discussing that. I think
Yes,
when
so-
we're coming upon the decision that I think that will be responded to.
Great.
Um,
Has there been legal advice?
And I think that I heard mostly statements. I'm sorry.
I heard-
What questions specifically? What did we?
Has the board taken legal advice
Oh.
on our liability?
advice,
And that would be the one area where we would not speak with respect to legal life. Because usually a solicitor or occasionally a solicitor will be here, but a legal question is properly reserved for our solicitor.
And could it be shared? Could you share that with the public then? I mean, I appreciate that it did not hear. And I think what you're saying is you haven't consulted the solicitor.
I will say that any guidance, and I'm not disagreeing with the word you're saying, but I will also say, with respect to compliance, Abington Heights is in compliance because there are no mandates.
With mandates,
There
they
are
are.
no man, we are.
There are
in compliance
guidelines which we are not in
With
compliance.
respect to the CDC, we are not in compliance with the CDC guidance, and we have been, had we been fully compliant with CDC guidance for the last 18 months, we nearly would never have opened our doors.
Yes,
to any students.
that is true. I
And
realize
so
that.
the CDC guidance is something very important, and we don't take light. No one would take lightly the idea that we wouldn't follow it to the letter. However, our experience is that following the CDC guidance to the letter would not, well, ultimately, in my view, would have done far greater harm to our students than benefit them.
Do you make that claim about the current guidance?
No, I'm saying over
Okay.
time,
Thank
over time. And not at the current guidance, because
Okay.
we're going forward and
So-
we have no crystal ball here. But
Sure,
in
the current guidance is-
retrospectively,
Yes.
and I don't mean to denigrate the CDC and the great work they do, but had we followed their guidance to the T over time,
The school would not have been open
we
in
would have never
person for
opened our
most of
doors.
it.
We would have never opened our doors.
But that's not the case with the current guidance. Current guidance just asks,
And
we do
again,
this.
we're beyond questions.
Fair
now,
enough.
I think, in fairness.
Okay.
Okay.
Rachel, Rudy, let's just.
I have a question. You said September 8th is the start of school,
I believe that's-
and you gave us some discussion options. So would we be making that publicly at our next board meeting, a decision? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, and that decision-making process is driven by the board, not the superintendent. So I thought that we need to make everybody aware, have the conversation, get insight, feedback, continue to monitor the situation as numbers and circumstances change. But I would be quite surprised if whatever we decided in early August was going to be what we would actually be doing in September, just as if anything we decided in early July would be hard to justify in early August. So, I mean, this is a fluid situation. Yes, we need to be transparent to the public. We need to be voting on things. We need to have a plan that everyone can see, and we need to communicate. But, what happens today, may not be fully applicable to something that happens on September.
Oh, sure, I understand, but I'm just looking at our calendar. We have one more August meeting, and then
Do we have a work?
do we have a work session before the start of school? Okay, we have two meetings before.
Right.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I think one of the communications we're going to get out next week is everyone has to be flexible and be prepared. For example, we know now that we are required for all of our students to wear masks on buses. Last time we were a little not quite certain, but we've been able to verify. So we'll be communicating to everyone that you must wear a mask on a bus. And so the thought then is perhaps that we're ready to do anything along the way, and we have to be prepared and also be prepared that what we say on September 8th may not be exactly the way we're operating on October 8th. So that's the key to our success this year, I think, will be flexibility.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a parent of 3 children in the district. I'm also a special education teacher at a local neighboring district.
If you could just state your name, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Rachel Rudy.
Okay.
Thank you. Since the start of the pandemic, I've made it my daily mission to fully inform myself concerning the virus from reputable sources, not the news, to inform my decision-making as a parent and as a teacher. To date, there is not a single peer-reviewed case study or positive data correlation that proves the efficacy of masks and the mitigation of this virus. There are, however, countless peer-reviewed case studies that prove the physical and psychological harm imposed by long-term mask wearing for our children. I work with children that have severe learning needs and speech delays. I can't describe to you what it was like this past year to have them read to me when they can't read more than 9 correct words per minute on a good day with a mask on while they have a speech delay. This is set to be the 3rd year where our children are disrupted because of this virus. There will never be 0 cases or 0 deaths. This is a virus. That's not how viruses work. I don't need to be a doctor to say that. It's just not how they work. It's always going to be here. We're going to mask our children for years and years to come during critical years of development. Data shows that the rates of transmission among and from children are practically non-existent. The CDC provisional death charts as of this week state that 340 children have died so far during this entire pandemic in this country from this virus. The CDC pretends to be very transparent, but they haven't been as transparent in telling us what other issues that those children had. Any loss of life is tragic, of course, but we have somehow come to the belief that risk, sickness, and death can be avoided altogether at the expense of our healthy children who've been given very destructive messages during this time that being close to someone, breathing near someone could hurt someone severely. We're going to feel the impacts of this for years to come. We are basing mask guidance off of cases and cases only, not deaths and hospitalizations. These case numbers are coming from a rapid PCR test that the CDC and FDA have just recently said they're going to discontinue using by the conclusion of the end of the year because it does not differentiate between the flu and the cold and can provide false positives and negatives. A mandate is not a law. Again, when will this end? What is our goalpost? To believe that our children should be mandated to wear masks during school is to be a denier of science. And we've been told over and over again, trust the science and the experts, but this has gone on for far too long. And like I said, when will it end? There will never be 0 cases or deaths. We wish that masks could do what we were told they would do. But again, there's not a single peer review case study or positive data correlation that shows that they do anything. Thank you.
Thank you. I did see a study, I think in England, it was a broad study that said children seem to be protected because there are some, and you might know, some ACE adapter or something is that they don't have it yet. A receptor, a receptor that they don't have yet. And you need that receptor to get the virus. There's some, I'll send you the article, it was in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, so it kind of explains why children might be somewhat protected because they don't have the, the physical means to even get or transmit the virus, mostly. Not 100%. But anyway, for what it's worth. Thorsten Dahm.
Hi, good evening. My name is Thorsten Dahm. I live right down the street and I have a very enthusiastic rising third grader at CSE who hopes to return to class and who loves her class and who also loves the online school the virtual school done with live instruction by an excellent Abington Heights teacher from September to February. So what worked really well last year was that you made every effort to accommodate families with different needs and different risk factors. And that was great. So I am rising here tonight in opposition to making masks optional in all classrooms. And I do it for 4 reasons. One is our youngest children cannot be vaccinated yet. And we all know, I think most of us know who trust the science, we know vaccine is the best way to protect ourselves. Second best way is mask. But the thing is, my mask protects you much better than it protects myself. So letting students into classroom where masks are optional and there will be unmasked kids is not really protecting the children, okay? And so one thing I've seen as well as the online school has worked, it's worked really well academically. When my second grader transitioned back, she was actually ahead in the material a little bit of her peers who had been in the A/B hybrid school because they had more live instruction. But of course, it wasn't fun. But I think one thing I've learned is one thing that doesn't work is being in quarantine. And my wife has admonished me to use only formal language, but I don't know how else to say it. Being in quarantine sucks. It's so bad. Now, the question is, I think we're asking ourselves, what's the lesser evil? The minor annoyance of having masks, which I think it's a foregone conclusion, will reduce transmission in classrooms, will reduce the need for quarantine versus sending students into quarantine all the time, at least until students have had a chance to be vaccinated. And once everybody has had a chance to be vaccinated, okay, let's reassess. But why do we have to do this now? A lot has been said about psychological impacts. I think there's also a psychological impact on the younger students. If we're telling them now, well, you can't be vaccinated yet, but your classroom won't have masks either. So there are some children too who think, who were troopers, who wanted to protect themselves, who did all the right things. And giving kids agency is also important, okay? Number 3, things have changed since the last meeting. And so, I was kind of hoping I'm preaching to the choir here a little bit, and I'll wrap things up, but CDC has now changed. Wear masks in K through 12, regardless of transmission. American Academy of Pediatrics too. So our numbers have actually doubled since the last meeting. Still low, but if they keep doubling, what's going to happen? And finally, I think we all know as parents, it's so much easier to loosen a strict rule when conditions permit it than to tighten the loose rule when conditions require it. So why are we saying, oh, we're not going to do anything, we're not going to, and then maybe we might change instead of being cautious, as you've been so valiantly all of last year, and then being more permissive if it really turns out that things aren't as bad. And my last sentence, unfortunately, from a lot of families who are now freaked out totally about not having masks in the classrooms, and they're thinking of leaving the school district for the cyber schools, which you keep telling us, Dr. Mayan, aren't as good academically. And those families have stood in solidarity with unvaccinated teachers and staff throughout the year until all adults could be vaccinated. And so I would implore you to now stand in solidarity with them until really everybody can be vaccinated, at least until that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina Wolf, and Isabella Wolf. Is that two? You're going together?
She wants to speak too. She's a resident. I guess she can.
Of course.
If you change your mind, that's fine. Okay. Hi, my name is Christina Wolf. I'm from Clarks Green, and I have two children in Clarks Summit Elementary. Here, I'll take my mask down because I'm vaccinated. Gio and Isabella. 2019 was hard on us as a family. I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I went through months of aggressive inpatient chemotherapy. It was tough. 2020 was going to be my year. Then we know how that turned out. I struggled with the decision to keep my children in-person learning because of my condition, but keeping them virtual was detrimental to their academics. So we took every precaution. Our daily routine is unchanged for 3 years. Drop your shoes, your book bags, and your masks at the front door. Wash your hands, and then proceed into the house. Every day for 3 years. We've repeated the same in the bubble chemo protocols, and no one is more tired of this than me and them. But COVID isn't gone though, and I am vaccinated, but my children are not. Since virtual and hybrid are no longer an option, I expected the board to take the same conservative approach that they did last year. So mask optional is a big concern for me and my family. I ask you to reconsider your stance and keep things flexible and make masks a requirement, especially for the first few weeks of school until the numbers in the schools can be assessed, especially for the elementary level who cannot get vaccinated. Or create an option for health concerned parents like me to have our kids in a mask mandated room, just like a child would be protected with a peanut allergy. My child wears masks every day indoors. Every store we go into, every place we go. They don't have a problem with them. Please err on the side of caution for my children and keep me out of the hospital. Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you want to? You changed your mind. That's okay.
Amy Scandell.
Hi, thanks for having me again. I'm a nurse and I'm off on a Wednesday again. So I'm just getting to meet all of you, but in person, because I've watched the Zoom meetings for the last year. I do have some stats and is that going to be okay to yell out?
If you just would say your address.
Oh, I'm sorry. Amy Scandell. I live in Waverly. I'm an Abington Heights parent and I'm a taxpayer in the district. Thank you. Some PA stats that I saw, Dr. Cadman, I don't know where Geisinger's getting theirs, but I found this today. Lackawanna County average 11 cases per day over the past week with 0 deaths. 7 days. I work in a hospital. We're not admitting COVID patients. I know this for a fact because I work in the hospital. the entire state of PA, 1,215 cases in the entire state, 2 deaths. That doesn't seem like a substantial rise. And I'm not going to argue with Geisinger, but I do work in a hospital and I have to look at stats all the time. I was hoping to put the mask debate to rest actually, because you guys know how I feel about it. If someone wasn't here, I feel like it should be optional. I feel like all medical decisions should be made by the parent, everything, and that includes masks. My kids have not worn masks all year because we were virtual all year. And I'll get to that in a second of why. I would like to talk about academics. Kids have suffered for the last year and a half. What type of testing or metric are you going to do at the beginning of the year to see? I'm hoping my kids are on track. I don't really know. And I'm sure you guys don't know either. What metrics are you going to do? And if kids aren't on track, could you do like a math boot camp for my 5th grader? I hope she knows her multiplications and her fractions, and I'm praying that I did the right thing the past year, but I don't know. So I'm really concerned about that. And I think we should talk about education. I think the mask thing could go round and round and round. And I feel like there's going to be opinions. You're not going to change mine. I may not change others, but we're voicing our concerns. Also, I think there was like 142 families, Dr. Mahan, I read in the paper, I could have wrong, and 12 families returned from cyber. That could be wrong. But do you know why they're not returning? Do we have that data? And you don't have to ask that now unless you're comfortable.
I think they are returning.
No.
We're seeing more and more.
But out of the 142, you were quoted in the paper that said 12 are returning.
I think it was 12 within the last week.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So-
Maybe I read
so
the
there-
article
so
wrong.
there- And we had many there. Before,
Right.
I get out of it, but we had many there before.
Gotcha.
COVID.
Yeah.
And while the numbers certainly shot up, we're
Right.
seeing them
Okay.
come back.
Well, I'm one of them. I went to Commonwealth Charter Academy and I'm returning to Abington Heights.
Good to have.
Thank you. And I'm having faith that you'll make the right choices for all our kids. And the last thing I want to say is the July 21st meeting was a little heated. My husband watched the whole thing at home with my kids. He went to re-listen to a part of it. He was able to re-listen, and then an hour later, the video was gone. And I would like to know where that is, because I've watched the videos after, like at midnight when I got home from work over the past year. And I'd like to know where that is.
And I am looking for it, is the answer.
Okay, because some people want to rewatch it.
They're all there.
Okay,
Except that one. And there's some setting or something.
Okay.
to-
all right.
It was not, it just has to be, there's like studio, what's the thing?
Creator student.
Creator
Right.
studio.
Okay,
So it's a technical thing. that
okay,
was
yeah, because
likely my
I would
fault.
like to watch it,
And I would like. to have it
because,
posted,
yeah,
once I
and
figure it
kind
out,
of
I'll get it back.
reabsorb some things.
Yep, there was
And
nothing-
yeah, and I know my time's up, but the education questions really are my huge, huge concerns right now, along with the masks. But it is a parental choice for every medical decisions, and masks is a parental decision. What Rachel said, it causes psychological, emotional, and my kids aren't used to them because they didn't wear them all year. 5 or 7 hours a day. They did not. And I really do not want them to be wearing a mask. So thank you. If you could answer the educational things, thank you.
We have lots going. Fred, Dr. Vitale, you want to take a crack at some of that? I mean, I know we're doing all of our standardized testing in the fall and again in the spring. So I'll have the pre and post test, but beyond that, I'll just defer to you.
So we're obviously doing our testing, like Dr. Mahan said, our state standardized testing in the fall and then again in the spring. So that will be a benchmark. At the elementary level, we hired more intervention teachers and more reading specialists with the anticipation of servicing our students. We do a universal benchmark screening at the elementary levels to see where they're at. At every other level, we will be benchmarking, seeing where our students are at. In Abington Heights, we meet students where they're at and we move them and make sure they're on grade level. So this is something that we are actively discussing and planning on how to do it. This summer, we did an elementary summer, it was Comet Camp for students who were really struggling to hopefully bring them up to speed. High school, we also did credit recovery and offered a lot more options for that. In the spring, we did a middle school after school tutoring program to try to again bring students up to speed. So we are really trying to do everything we can to make sure that students are on grade level, if not above.
So
Mrs.
I want to say
Vitale.
our board Our board hired 9 now additional staff members, which is a very big thing. And the primary purpose was to meet the needs of kids who are struggling. So this is the most serious of all topics that we take. And I'm very certain that the efforts we're undertaking will have positive effect, especially for those kids who need us the most.
Ms. Vitale, do you have like a number that we're taking the courses in the summer, both elementary and high school, or?
We had about 145 elementary students and about 70, a little under 70 high school students that were taking the courses. And we serviced about 60 middle school students in the spring. We also added, in addition to reading and math specialists, 2 school counselors to really make sure that we're servicing the whole student.
How did you identify who would be part of the summer program?
At the high school, it was based on students that were failing and needed credit recovery. At the other levels, it was based on student assessments and then teacher recommendation. And then we opened it up to asked our parents if they were willing to have their student attend.
So assessments were done at the end of the school year, close to the end of the school year, to see where they were. And then what happens, you were talking about meet the grade. So what happens if they're in 3rd grade and then you do all your assessments and you determine that they're not at the 3rd grade level?
So we have an incredibly skilled faculty that is able to differentiate instruction and make sure that we meet our students and we see what they need. We fill in any skill gaps and we bring them up to speed. And it's all through differentiation and small group learning. The elementary level, that typically is what happens because there's a wider spectrum of ability because in the classroom, whereas when you get to the high school level, they're tracked a little bit differently. So it's what our teachers do and they do it well.
And then what about the students who are not only caught up but are excelling? How are they going to be impacted by, are they going to get their differentiated?
Yeah,
education
so
as
it's
well?
going to be the same thing on the whole spectrum of ability of just making sure that we are growing each student individually and each student is progressing.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Vitale, so for the assessment that's in the fall, is that assessment test changing at all considering the situation, or is it just the normal assessment? And then, and I'm not trying to project that there'll be humongous gaps, but if there are across, any school district, what's the plan to fill the gap? Because right now it's like isolated gap filling, right? But this is the, for lack of a better word, the real assessment, the one that was postponed last spring. So is there more weight given to this one or less weight, or is it just business as usual?
Definitely not business as usual. I mean, our business is education and making sure every student achieves. But I would say that we're really going to spend a lot of time digging into that data of the universal benchmarks and beginning of the year testing, as well as the PSSAs and keystones that we administer. And then from there, we'll have to make decisions. I know our professional development plan is at every grade level and every department is going to meet all year long so that we can really make sure we know where our students are, we're tracking, and then we're offering supports when they need. If we need to make larger instructional decisions based on larger deficits or gaps in very specific areas, we are, again, it's a year of flexibility. We are going to be very flexible and just making sure that we do what we need for our students and support them in every way.
Yeah. And Mr. Robson, I would add, the PSSAs offered in the fall are not a good indication of what really is happening. And while we certainly hope for very, very high scores, we will not be alarmed if we see unusual variations from what we've done in the past. We will be very alarmed if we see that continue into the spring. So what we would hope to see is a test that's given at the wrong time of year, after the summer, after a difficult year, in a way that's never been given before, being a bit of an outlier, but the tests we give in the spring being a much better indicator, in addition to the data that we gather on our own as to where we are. But we're not waiting for the spring to say, well, if we have a problem, we're doing it individually along the way so that no one falls behind. But when the results come in and we're sitting here in November looking at the scores from September, we're going to expect unusual things in the data, and we'll deal with them for sure.
But we're not waiting for that to do our.
But we are not waiting for that.
Anyone else like to address the public?
There actually
or
is one,
board?
Mrs. Brashowski, there's a speaker from home.
Okay,
Let's see, allowed to talk. Kairos Naylor, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and let me turn up the volume and we can hear you. 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Karis Nair. I live on Tulip Circle in Clark Summit, and I'm the parent of an incoming 6th grader who is not yet old enough to be vaccinated. I'm going to keep my remarks very, very short tonight. I simply want to say this. In light of the recent statements by the CDC, the Department of Education, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, all advocating that our children should be in school but masked, I would urge the school board to reconsider the mask optional policy, particularly in buildings such as the middle school and the elementary schools, where students are not yet eligible for vaccination. Masks remain the most reliable way we have to protect these children, the ones that are not yet old enough to be vaccinated. And that is all that we have at the moment to rely on. And that is the best way that many parents will feel comfortable sending their children back to school. Our daughter experienced all of the modes of education last year, and she benefited from them. We want to send her back to the classroom this year. She will benefit from that the most, but we also want her to be protected when she comes back to school, as we want all of the unvaccinated children to be. And we continue to feel that it is always easier to relax those standards. I think that this has been pointed out before. It is always easier to relax standards than it is to tighten them. And so at least as long as there are children in our district who are not yet eligible because of their ages to be vaccinated, I would encourage the members of the school board and Dr. Mahan to reconsider this policy and seriously consider at least having our children who are not yet eligible for vaccination be masked while they are in the classroom. It's one thing if they are unmasked when they are outdoors, but at least in the classroom to be vaccinated so that everyone can be more protected. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Is that it?
that concludes.
Okay. Dr. May we have the personnel report?
Yes. I want to see if we can get back to. Trying to get this up. Okay. Yes, thank you, Mrs. Brashowski. To the personnel report, we request the board to appoint Allison Rogalevich of Clark's Green, a professional contract with step 15 at a salary of $78,079.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mrs. Brashowski.
Yes.
9 yes.
And we request the board to approve Gregory Moyer as a first semester long-term substitute at a salary of $27,469, which is step 1.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Brashowski.
Yes.
9 yes.
And we request the board to approve the listed EDR positions, which is a partial list for our fall coaches.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
Dr. Mann, I noticed we do have the coaches for junior high girls soccer and varsity girls.
We do. We're very excited about that, and we are grateful to the board for providing that opportunity to our students.
That's great. Thank you very much for putting that together.
Roll call?
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mrs. Brashalski.
Yes.
9 yes.
Okay, and Mr. Brzezowski, that concludes the personnel report. Thank you.
Okay. At our work sessions, we offer a second opportunity for public comment. If there is anyone who wishes to address the board at this time. If you could just, okay.
And Superintendent Mahan, typically after the public speaks, I know you talked to some of the topics. And one thing I wrote down was around quarantines. And I know we spent quite a bit of time
Yes.
analyzing results, what the thought process was before, what we found, especially with testing. So I know one of the public members talked about quarantines. Did you just want to talk a little bit about, because we did spend a lot of time on that.
I sure do. And that will be in the frequently asked questions that we hope to put out early next week, following our meeting. But if we go back to last year, we were vigilant in our quarantines. And I was patting myself on the back saying, we're not seeing internal transmission because of all this quarantining that we're doing. Hundreds of students for days and days out of the building. And once we had compiled large numbers, a large data set of the students that have been quarantined, we realized that the students we were quarantining were not coming down with COVID. And so we weren't doing anything protective to the students, but we were harming the individuals who were being excluded from school for days for ultimately no reason. And so we adopted what a number of other districts adopted across the state in a modified quarantine, in that students who were on modified quarantine, as would be the case this year, were required to wear masks, had enhanced social distancing requirements within the classroom. They were asked, although not forced, to get a test, which is helpful in our data collection. And we found that to be very successful. Now, modified quarantine was not available for individuals who, for example, had a case of COVID in their household, where they would be continually exposed on a daily basis. So that seemed to work very well for us, and we were comfortable with its implementation in light of the fact that we were not able to see that the individuals we were quarantined were actually becoming sick because of a 6-foot, 15-minute exposure, which was the standard we were using in the classroom to determine a close contact.
I just have, just a little comment on that. I mean, I'm thrilled about all that, and I, supported the decisions we made surrounding that. But I think, for me, at least, I keep in mind the fact that coming down with COVID, when we're not testing, is really a statement that is just speculative, because we really don't know how many, if any, students were asymptomatic with COVID, which at the time, the reports were that tended to be that population of, that age group were asymptomatic, carriers and things. So I just, for myself, I keep that in mind, that without testing for COVID, it's just speculative that nobody caught COVID.
Yes, I would add though, once testing became, we originally had a 14-day quarantine, and then we reduced it to 7, 10, and then I think ultimately to 7 with negative test results. And so toward the end of the process, which actually prompted us to make the recommendation, because you're correct, people can have COVID, only minor symptoms and maybe not even know. But as we saw so many results coming in that were intended to allow students to come back at day 7 as opposed to day 14, it reinforced our suspicions that we had. So while we did not have a full data set of testing, we did have a sufficient data set that gave us encouragement that supported our observations. And that really came about when we reduced the quarantine from 14 to 7 days. And we had some more rapid response to the testing, which was really not available earlier in the quarantine.
Did our transmission rate or number of infected, actual positive cases of students or teachers in the district follow the county?
It did.
Like, was it a kind of on a percent basis? basis? or-
Right, when the county level was catastrophically high around the holidays, late in the year, early in the calendar year, we were seeing many instances of COVID in our buildings for sure. What we were not seeing was transmission within our buildings with the close contacts that we were able to determine. We were actually, our impression was bolstered because we were clearly seeing high rates of transmission at certain off-school activities where there were not mitigation efforts in play, a party, candidly, and some locker room areas and other activities. So we were able to detect significant transmission in some activities that occurred outside. We were not able to detect, in spite of being very close, observed transmission inside, but the incident rate in our buildings was, I think, very consistent with incident rates in our county and in our state.
I was just wondering if the rate, with having the young population, the children, maybe ours was slightly lower than, countywide.
It might have been lower. And I would say, I truly believe that our students were safer in our buildings than they were outside our buildings at a daycare or wherever it was because it really is not, I don't think, a measure of absolute level of transmission, but relative to where they would be otherwise. Because if they're not in school, transmission is still going to occur wherever it is they are. So we did see increased rates of infection as we saw increased prevalence of COVID in our community, for sure. But we did not see increased rates of transmission. And I think transmission rates were lower in our buildings during the 6 hours that our kids were there than they were in the community in the incomplete acknowledging data that we were able to look at. And what I will say, I'm reading across the state, many places are not doing the contact tracing and the recording. We very much will continue to do that because we want to be able to see what is happening in our buildings and to track it, to say that, look, whatever it is we're doing when we start school is working, or it really isn't, and we have to take more drastic measures. I'll just give a quick, for example, with respect to education. Guided reading is a really big thing in elementary. We have tables where students will sit around the table and engage in these very constructive activities that help them to learn to read. Now, last year, we pulled out the guided reading tables. It was a loss to us educationally for the spacing that we were able to get, the increased social distancing that we were allowed because these tables were not in the room. Now, the board allowed us to rent these large storage trailers to store these materials. Now, we're going to start this year, by bringing those guided reading tables back in, but we did not get rid of the storage. We still have the capacity where if we see things are changing and we need more social distancing, then we're prepared to go back as a layered strategy, as they are kind of calling it now, to adjust to conditions. So we're very much thinking about this. There's a high degree of uncertainty, but we will be responding as best we can to changing conditions and the direction that the board gives us as to how to proceed.
Any other comments from the board before we invite the public to speak? Okay, sir, did you want to? Sure. Is that Thorsten Dahm? Is that?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Thanks again. I just have one update. My wife just texted me. She's a professor at Penn State, and Penn State just passed a universal mask mandate, regardless of campus, regardless of vaccination status, regardless of community transmission. Now, Penn State is very different in that they're only adults there. Everybody has had a chance to be vaccinated. In our elementary school classrooms, we know that 97%, that some 25 students, will be unvaccinated. The only person in there who could possibly be vaccinated is the teacher. It's a completely different situation. Also, as great as everything worked last year, it was because of all the measures, and masks were a part of these measures. Now we're saying, maybe no more masks. You're also bringing back the reading tables, which is great. So there's going to be less distancing, and we're having new variants. We're having Delta, Delta plus, Lambda. Last year, the wild type that was like the little kitty cat of the viruses. Now we have the tiger. So please take all of this into consideration. Penn State, Geisinger, national advice, everybody's saying the ball game has changed dramatically. We need masks until we know, how these variants work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do have one speaker from home.
And one more from home.
Okay,
Okay.
there's still one here, I think.
Oh, sure. Oh, no, well, why don't we go, I'm sorry, your name right here? Because it's Helene, I didn't even recognize you, Helene. You have your hair different, and everything. Why? Okay, sure. I'm sorry. It's been a while. She's like, it's Helene. How did you- Okay.
Please excuse me.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on, Helene Magnata, 206 Barberry Lane, Clark Summit. I was not planning on asking any questions, but I feel the need to follow up regarding the ventilation. We're talking about doing everything we can do to ensure that parents feel comfortable with their kids in the classroom, especially middle school and elementary. So we are saying our ventilation systems are well-maintained and provide a wonderful environment. But how do we know that? Have we proved that? Have we taken any tests? And in that regard, they're not difficult to do. A qualified company can come out and strategically put boxes, so to speak, in different areas of the classrooms, different levels of the building. And when they're in the classroom, monitor the carbon dioxide and oxygen levels and know truly if our ventilation is as good as we say it is. So I think that would give parents better level of confidence about having their kids in the classroom, especially with the debate of whether to have masks or no masks. So is there any?
How do we, we're saying,
Well, we
how do
do air testing, but we change filters. We can, one of the best tests is when you can feel the air coming out. You open the door at the middle school. We have very good ventilation.
So feeling the air is satisfactory to the board members?
I don't know enough about.
Well,
And
if,
Dr. Mayan said we do air quality testing, so.
I don't know if it's a combination of oxygen. I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
That's the response.
I don't think it's a bad idea to do air quality testing. I mean, again, I don't know when the last time was that we tested the air quality, but
I think the last time might have been tested that I've heard of was in Clark Summit Elementary when there was a water problem with the library. And that was extensively tested. I think there might have been some testing during the asbestos abatement in middle school, but I don't know of any testing in the high school. And again, I don't see how we would test every room. However, there's a way to go about it strategically and professionally that the units are placed not in a common, well-ventilated area, but rather in an area where kids are and unknowingly not sure what is in the air. The air can be flowing like it is outside, but it's not as clean as it used to be years ago. So I would be very interested in hearing what the board thinks about having the testing done for overall safety and insurance to the district,
yeah, that's a
teachers,
fair
parents, students.
suggestion. Is that something we could look into just to see what type of testing is available and
Well,
what that would be?
we do air testing,
Mhm.
and we do it frequently. I'm not sure exactly the schedule. And we often find, and that's like particulate matter in the air. We often find the air inside is cleaner than that outside, with, if it's pollen and all that kind of thing. I think the issue of ventilation with respect to COVID is not so much air quality as air exchange. And we have high rates of air exchange. Those calculations have been done. And we also have filtration where we've always regularly changed our filters to the highest appropriate filtration, because to do too much actually prevents airflow. It's a
Mhm.
something that, again, I can't really speak to, but our people can. And so I am very comfortable, and the air testing that we've always done historically would be concerns about, mold or mildew or those types of things. Those are the things that are captured in air quality testing. It will not capture air exchange, which I think is the primary factor, as I understand it, in making sure that COVID is not spreading in classrooms.
What they normally do is they measure the number of times that the air is totally taken out of the room and put back into the
Right.
room. So there's a number that they'll use for how many times that is done in a certain amount of hours or whatever. So that's how the systems are rated. And I know you've done those things and they've all been approved for great exchange of air. So
But that still doesn't answer the question of air quality. I mean, if there are any soil tiles from previous water damage, the ceiling tiles up above there is perfect breeding ground for mold, mildew, and I still think it's worth consideration because air quality is different from air exchange.
Okay, I mean, we can look into it, see if air quality is, I mean, I can't imagine we would allow dirty tiles to remain in buildings, and we maintain our rooms, but we can probably talk to our maintenance, just to make sure that we don't have any tiles around or anything of that nature, so,
I think you'll probably find some.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
You must have seen one, did you?
I'm not saying anything. I'm just asking a
All right.
question out of a concerned citizen.
It's worth noting.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you. Did you say there was one more?
Yes, and we have, well, we did. Here, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
and
okay.
Amy.
Yep.
But, okay, sure, come on, Amy.
I'm just slightly frustrated here because I feel like it's Groundhog Day. Do we have any numbers? We're a month out from school. This is why I was frustrated a year ago about the 5-day-a-week thing. That's why I went to CCA, because I never felt that there was ever going to be an answer. Do we have numbers of what you want to go by, mask, no mask? I mean, I just feel like it really does have to, you have to put some solid information out there, because some people are for masks and they want masks, and some people are not. So we really need to make a decision, because some people may go to homeschooling or a cyber school based on this decision. So I'm not trying to be a pain, but I just really feel like we need some data and some solid numbers on the website ASAP, not at your work meeting in September.
You're saying what would trigger us?
Trigger,
to
yeah,
change
yeah. I
our
would just like to see those
change
numbers.
The policy.
Exactly, because it's mask optional right now, but
Mhm.
I feel like, because Dr. Mahan at the beginning said it could 100 days, that's what it is going to feel like till school. Well, we can't just be this doom and gloom. We just should put the numbers out there and say, we're going to go by this. Yes, things can change, but people really need to plan their lives. And that's why I had to make a decision a year ago, because I didn't feel like you guys were telling us like it might be 5 days, might be 5 days. And then, it was
We made a
not.
decision very early on that we were starting virtual, right?
Yeah, well, it was like at the end of July, I think, yeah. And it was very wishy.
I know,
Yeah.
it's very frustrating for
Yeah.
everyone, including us, because
Yeah, and I know it's
we
hard.
can't predict
Yeah.
what's going to happen tomorrow. We can make a decision today, and tomorrow morning wake up and read that something just blew up. I mean, so it is hard for us.
But that's
to-
life, but we do need
Right,
to,
so right
yeah,
now, our policy is mask optional,
right.
and if things change.
But that's what you're saying. If things change,
Yes,
based on
things
what
change,
number,
based on
what
based
metric?
on whatever data is available, and we're probably going to be looking at a large number. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
about Lackawanna County, but then that might not be.
Right,
the
because the
only
Lackawanna
statistic we
County's
look at.
numbers are virtually nothing right now.
That's right
And,
now.
and that's
tomorrow-
great.
right.
But we can't put people into a panic, and I would like to have you guys, have a number to go by or some type of guideline, not, we'll check the data, we'll check this, like, where are you going to get the numbers from when you make a
I think
change?
that
Or
was the question I asked. You said we were going to be looking at our county data most particularly.
so, yeah, and I'm trying to, just get some
but
answers.
Even, I mean, there are so many variables. that even if Lackawanna County in a bubble is like fabulous, if our contiguous counties and our kids are traveling to those counties
Right.
and all of a sudden they're exploding, we
Right.
might look at that and
Yeah.
and reconsider, or, I
Right.
honestly, I really feel that we just have to wait a little
Right.
bit longer before we can make that decision.
But-
Whether or not to change. So right now.
Right, yeah, but what guideline will it change is what I'm saying, percentage, because I know Dr. Mahan, you did great with stats last year and, people, was paying attention to all that of, transmission and everything like that, you had data. So there's got to be some type of a,
You want to say something? Rod?
Yeah, sure. I guess
I mean, I just want to,
Don't press it, maybe? I don't know. Okay.
my answer to that question would be, there are way too, you use the word variables. There are way too many variables that are going to come out in the next 2 weeks, let alone the next 4 weeks.
right,
So I can give you my own, I mean, we're all have a vote on this, right?
Right.
My own answer to, is there a possibility that we're going to be mask optional in my mind? My vote changing? Absolutely. So, but I'm going to look at the data for the next few weeks.
Right,
And it's
like-
not one.
and
let me
what
finish,
data
please.
though?
Let me
Yeah,
finish.
All of it.
There's not one piece of data.
right.
There are many pieces of data. There's Lackawanna County
Oh, yeah, I
statistics.
know.
There's, let me
Mhm.
finish.
Mhm.
There's Wyoming County statistics. There's Luzerne County statistics. There are death rates. There are hospitalization rates. I'm not going to give you a
Yeah.
math equation today
Right,
that is going
Yeah.
to give you the comfort that you're looking
Right.
for. You're not going to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that
Yeah.
you're not going to be
Yeah.
comfortable, but that's just life. And
right.
I'm
I'm
not
very
comfortable-
aware. I worked in a
I
hospital a
know,
year
but
and a half.
you're
last
asking
year
us
and a
to
half, yeah.
give you a number today, and I'm trying to tell you.
I mean,
why
a
that's an
guideline of what you're
extremely
going by, sir.
I think we answered
impossible
the question.
request.
Okay, all right.
I can also comment in as much as that I'm okay with mask optional currently for the next couple of weeks at least, because we have no students in the buildings. Because variables do change and there's so many and they're so conflicting, I absolutely, positively, unequivocally will be supporting mask mandates 2 weeks prior to the start of school, all personnel and all students.
It looks like we have one person from home.
Okay.
Okay, this will be Tina Healy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Oh, hi. My name's Dr. Tina Verdetti Healy. We are closing on a home on 822 Laconia Circle next week. I'm going to have a matriculating fourth grader, second grader, and kindergartner. And, I just wanted to weigh in on and plead to the board to reconsider the mask mandate. I know several other people have spoken. I appreciate their thoughts, but I definitely agree with what they have mentioned and some of the data that was presented in terms of really making masks a mandate. Just in light of all of the, rapidly spreading Delta variant of COVID-19, we know it's becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And the issue with that is 12 and under can't get vaccinated. And that's probably not going to be something that they can do until late 2022. And of course, we also have to think about our immune compromised folks as well. So, masking we know works. We've dealt with this for a year and a half. There's an abundance of data to show that it's the number one easy, cheap thing that we can do to protect ourselves, our kids, and like I said, the immune compromised and folks who can't get vaccinated. And I think that that's going to be the number one way that we can ultimately keep the schools open, which is what is, the best thing for our children. It's something that was recommended specifically by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And we also, there has been no data to suggest any major deleterious effects of masking. Kids are very, the kids have been great throughout this entire process, and they have adapted better than the adults have. It's not a new thing. We talk about, let's look at the numbers and what the percent positivity is right now. What are the case numbers right now? Who's sick right now? Who's getting hospitalized right now? But the way that this virus works is, and it's the progression of the virus in the individual is that it can take up to 14 days before symptoms manifest, if they ever manifest. And so what's happening right now is writing the future for 2 weeks from now. And that's always going to be the case. So, if we're making a decision on masking, today, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, and we look at the data from this very day, it's always going to be under reflecting what's actually happening. So the point is, we know masking works. Why not be proactive rather than reactive and get into trouble? Delta has been shown to, it's R naught number, meaning the number that one person can potentially transmit the virus to is anywhere between 5 and 9 people. So one person can transmit this disease to 5 to 9 people. The original COVID-19 virus was anywhere between 2 to 5. So we've now more than doubled the transmissibility. And that in and of itself, more people getting sick, more children getting sick, is going to lead to, even though the bad outcomes are rare, the more kids who get sick, the more those outcomes will ultimately manifest. So, I feel like we've been through this for over a year and a half now. We're having the same arguments that we had in the beginning, especially with masking. It's just such an easy thing that we can do. It's an easy, cheap, preventative measure. Our children are used to it. We're used to it. And I would urge the board to, consider, having a mandate for all, both faculty, students, vaccinated and unvaccinated people.
Thank you.
And
I did. Just as she was taught, I thought she was finished. Hold on.
oh, sorry, one last point. It's just
No, that was my fault.
No,
cut
that's
you off.
okay. That's okay. Just one last thing, if we don't go with the full mask mandate, then, perhaps if we could be prepared to offer full virtual again, that would be helpful for those who don't feel comfortable sending the kids to school if people aren't going to mask. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you. That's all from home.
Okay.
Mrs. Wachowski.
One more here.
All right. I sketched all this just now. My name's Lisa Evans, and Newton. I live in Newton, and I'll have 4 kids in the district this school year. So I just wrote this down. I love that everyone's talking. I love hearing everyone talk. These are just thoughts. It's just a conversation starter. I am actually bringing kind of no real answers. This might be what I'd say to a friend at a coffee shop, and then she'd, share her thoughts, and then we, arrive at something, hopefully, or not. But okay, so just my thoughts. Like, I love free choice as long as it doesn't lead to anarchy. So, for example, I love that I can choose where I shop. Unlike possibly other countries where they control that. And everyone, I'm sure some people like to shop mom and pop shops to support the small businesses. Some like the big box stores. Some want local. Some want stores that offer organic foods. Some prioritize low cost. Some do all the above or something different than what I just mentioned. The person decides. Of course, I believe not everything can be optional. I don't believe in running a red light or, swinging guns in a movie theater. So I do believe in that. And there's political parties. I believe if you had to simplify it, some political parties or people, what they support, they want to minimize the role of government. If you see it as a spectrum, and they want less control, and some want to maximize it and they want greater control. And some people are somewhere in the middle, and some people don't know. They're probably one on each, a little bit of each, not knowing they're being, maybe possibly a little inconsistent, but maybe that's okay. All right, so segue to schools. Many people believe that COVID is kind of like the flu or a cold. Other people strongly believe that it's like a disease that's going to lead to like chronic problems for life or death. And each people like are certain, and sometimes with info, they change their mind, and that's okay. We have that choice to change our minds as we grow and get more information. Some people are really afraid of the vaccine. It is new. Some people are afraid of not getting the vaccine. We were allowed as people to make our own choices in this country, and should be everywhere, but thankfully we still do that in this country. So I'm wondering, and this is just what I would say to a friend, should we consider options not even on the table? Maybe Abington's gotten too big. Maybe we should have more schools. Maybe there should be like more smaller schools. Maybe we should have some charter schools so we can shop around and choose. And just like I wouldn't judge someone for shopping at a grocery store different from me, I wouldn't judge someone for choosing a different school. I'd say, oh, okay, that's cool. Most of my closest friends, all our kids go to different schools, you know, whether it's homeschooling or Christian school or charter or Abington, we're all friends. There's no division. So this is my closing. But after brainstorming and realizing it's just not financially feasible, really, this is best. We really want one big giant school. After doing a cost analysis, hang on, I always do this at the end when the timer rings, I lose my train of thought. Let's see, maybe we just need to ask ourselves, okay, so if we decide really one school is it, how can we respect and meet the needs of a variety of strong preferences? As you guys know, I'm big on walking to school, and Abington isn't. How can we meet the needs of the families that don't want masks and the ones that do? The ones that want to vax and the ones that do. And then no one's even talked about the critical race theory. Maybe some people want it, some don't. What if we are getting too big? But if we decide we can't split up and become smaller schools and allow more charters in the area, how do we meet the needs of everyone? And that I don't have the answer to. But I just want to put out just a thought, like maybe a conversation starter. So that's all. Oh, and
I was waiting
well,
for the
we'll just stop
answer.
there.
I was at the edge of my seat. What's the answer?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, okay.
Yes.
I have no
Thank you.
answer.
And Mr. Bashar, if you would allow me just a thought. We see on television all the time, school board meetings that are full of rancor and people being very upset. And at those meetings, I think there are no more diverse opinions that were expressed tonight, but what a classy job everyone did here. So I do want to congratulate and thank everyone for the amazing, collegial, respectful, yet candid exchange of ideas that took place, which stands in stark contrast to places other than Abington Heights, because we're good at just about everything we do. So I just thought I'd offer that and thank all involved for their insight, thoughtful insight that was offered tonight.
Great.
I second that.
I third that. On a lighter note, we just approved quite a few fall coaches. And I know that the fall season gets started, I believe, August 16th. Dr. Mann, can you give us a little bit of an update on our fields? Are they all prepared and ready to go for all of our competitions? The soccer fields down at Clark Summit Elementary, the pit, can you give an update?
I haven't been out in a while, but I will tell you, our fields look so good right now because we haven't been running them down. This is the longest time we've had without heavy competition, and the grass is amazing. And again, I haven't been out in a while to look at them, but at last look, our fields are so very beautiful, and our high school field is as green as it's ever been and is ready to go. And so I think we'll be all set and ready to go happily to start the fall season in a couple of weeks.
There have been some questions about the football games, the location of where the football games are going to be played. The majority of games will be at the pit here. Is that correct?
Sure. Yes, I believe that is true. And I'm not sure of the questions that have been raised. No one has raised questions to me about that, but.
I'm hearing from the community that they're concerned that they're going to be at the high school. Football games, yeah.
Well, you've heard from the superintendent about some of those issues, so I think that the discussion is in place and so.
I
you
know the first game is at is at the high school, but I've been asked if all of them are going to be at the high school.
I'll
And
have
I
to look
didn't, I
into
didn't
it
have a
and get
question
back.
to that, I don't have I didn't know. I'm sorry, what did you say?
I'll have to get back to you.
I was at the track this morning, and I can tell you that they were marking the soccer field and the practice football field.
Good.
So it looked, like you said, it looked fantastic.
Right.
Yay, great.
I know it's frustrating for people to not hear an answer and the wondering and the waiting, but I mean, I really just feel that we just don't know enough at this today, what's going to happen September 8th. It's a very unusual circumstance we find ourselves in, this unknown, and you hear both sides, you hear all these authoritative sources tell you it's absolutely a must to wear a mask. And then you have the authoritative sources on this side saying it's absolutely detrimental to wear, or it helps a lot, it doesn't help at all. It's very difficult, and we just have to wait and see. And I know that you're frustrated by not getting the answer, but I just have to say that we're doing the best we can and make the decisions that we can. We want to keep everybody safe, and do what's best for the kids.
So I think we're set,
Okay,
Mr. Charlie.
I
We
think
do
we
we do
are.
need an executive
Yep.
session.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.